This is not a test.
Sistema de transmisión de emergencia. Esto no es una prueba.
The emergency broadcast system of Earth has been automatically triggered. Due to circumstances beyond our control, the President of the United States of America, Joseph Biden, is apparently being forced to say and do things against his will. Because of this, there is an extremely high probability that we are all now totally screwed. People are advised to remain calm, and think as clearly as possible. Avoid at all costs the well-funded and highly organized, far-leftist Marxist insurgency that has been rioting, burning, looting, and murdering their way across America since early 2020. They mean business. There is a lot of money and powerful people protecting them. Any confrontation leads immediately to the Twitter mob and progressive media response to discredit and harass the perpetrators. If you're not careful, the insurgency itself might be dispatched. That typically does not end well. It is highly recommended that people should ignore all woke politicians, celebrities, athletes, corporations, and media outlets until further notice, as they proliferate actual disinformation at an astonishing rate, while misinforming the public about what the truth really is. They aren't trying to gaslight you. They are instead serving as willing, or unwilling, entities of what has been deemed the Great Firewall of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. With the exception of a handful of true believers, they are doing so in order to continue to benefit politically and financially from the CCP-mandated slave labor and genocide of millions of innocent Muslims, Buddhists, House Christians, Falun Gong, and others, in and around territories occupied by the CCP. CCP-occupied territories include, but are not necessarily limited to, Macau, Hong Kong, Mongolia, Tibet, Xinjiang, and China. If they were to oppose the CCP, not only would they lose the benefit of the CCP slave-driven economy, but potential access to human organs freshly harvested from murdered prisoners of conscience as well. This information may come as a shock to some, and would be dismissed as baseless claims by the progressive media and big tech-funded fact-checking services. Regardless, the actual fact of the matter is, if these high crimes against humanity continue to be ignored, things will only get worse. It has also become evident that a widespread effort is underway to ensure progressive and woke ideological purity among followers of liberal politics. The public is advised to ignore any media questions if engaged in anything that isn't knowingly progressive or woke. What's next? Wigs and beauty products made from the hair shaved off the heads of minority Muslim women detained at CCP internment camps being shipped from CCP-occupied territories for distribution in America. Oh wait. That already happened. It is not known why MSNBC or Bloomberg didn't report about that. Maybe Bill Gates and Michael Bloomberg were too busy hiding from the fact that they spent time on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet to notice. The Associated Press and Fox News did. So what other excuse could they possibly have? And it gets so much worse from there. The truth, the real truth, is so bad that it is not suitable for a family-friendly public announcement. It centers around the reason why the anti-slavery legislation that passed nearly unanimously by the United States House of Representatives, an American parliamentary body, even by every single one of its most ardently labor members, has yet to be approved by the Senate and signed into law by President Joseph Biden. The truth is so horrifying that you'd never look at your iPhone the same way again. If you still want to know the truth, why don't you ask Apple CEO, Tim Cook? What was discussed when Apple quietly lobbied the US Senate late in 2020? Whatever was said It led to the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act failing to be ratified. It has been alleged that Apple is still knowingly, and for profit, continuing to use CCP slave labor. It makes perfect business sense, in an Apple kind of way. Even though it's the future now. They guilt trip and distract their customers by making them think that white privilege is still a real thing. And that all Caucasians are guilty of the enslavement of Africans centuries ago. All the while, hoping they forget that it was the Christians and Republicans that sacrificed their lives to free the African American slaves, and keep the country united during a time of great civil unrest. And hiding the fact that Chinese slaves make their iPhones and MacBooks for pennies, while they sell them to Western progressives and woke supremacists for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. I mean, how else is a decadently capitalistic corporation supposed to gross $250 billion a year in today's economy? So, who cares if Tim Cook got caught with his hand in the Xinjiang cookie jar anyway? People need their iPhones. Right? Why worry about the fact that Apple products might be delivered to consumers with the literal blood and tears of Muslim and minority slaves on them? Our friends and co-workers won't think we're cool if we don't have a device that requires slavery and forced sterilization in order to be manufactured. Besides, there's no better way to donate to a Marxist, BLM, slavery protesting, burning and looting riot than with the Apple Pay app, is there? Ahem. To that effect, the same Democratic National Committee members that unanimously voted against human rights abuses by the CCP against Muslims in particular, have time and time again unanimously done everything possible to support and increase atrocities committed by the Ayatollah in Iran. Up to, and including, large cash payments of billions of dollars to directly finance terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, ignoring heinous suppression and crimes against women, advocating for and nearly encouraging the anti-Islamic and anti-Semitic Iranian-backed militias like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, who use innocent civilians as human shields. Then blame their deaths and injuries on the countries defending against the often Ayatollah-ordered attacks. And excusing the nearly industrialized scale of forced confessions and executions of Iranian dissidents. Why would they do a thing like that, some would wonder. The answer is surprisingly simple. The CCP has heavily invested into the infrastructure of Iran, and makes tremendous profits from oil and crimes committed against humanity. Major progressive and woke multinational corporations in turn make tremendous profits from CCP slave labor. In order to keep making those massive capitalistic gains, they have to stay loyal to CCP communist ideology. Those same, often big tech, corporations, donate large sums of money to DNC political campaigns. In order to keep getting those large sums of money, otherwise known as blood money, donated to them, the DNC do everything in their power to politically facilitate and protect the CCP's investment in Iran. So much for the no blood for oil slogan. What was the definition of hypocrite again? I forget. Maybe I should Google it. So, does that make the DNC evil? Try viewing this situation from a different perspective. At the end of the First Gulf War, Saddam Hussein lit the Kuwaiti oil fields on fire, one of, if not the worst human-caused environmental disasters in history. The fires burned so intensely that they could not be extinguished by normal means. Specialized and insulated bulldozers had to be implemented, in order to get right up next to the oil geysers spewing fire into the Arabian sky, and detonate large explosive charges. The explosions consumed or displaced all of the oxygen in the area. Without oxygen, the flames dissipated, and the oil wells, one by one, were eventually sealed. The spread of the CCP's influence, and its particularly authoritarian brand of communism, otherwise known as totalitarianism, is analogous to the ignited Kuwaiti oil fields. You can't stop the CCP in Iran, or North Korea, or the Russian Federation, or Venezuela, or Myanmar. That's like shooting a grizzly bear with a BB gun. All you're going to do is tick it off. The CCP is a great big fire geyser, and the only way to snuff it out is at the source. With the ratification of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, President Joseph Biden and every subsequent president of the United States could unilaterally sanction any person or entity, anywhere, that uses the forced labor of ethnic minority Muslims. For all time. With the stroke of just one pen, the CCP would forever be deprived of, not oxygen, but what communists need more than anything else: capitalism. Without capital, the communistic fires that rage across the globe would, one by one, be suppressed, and eventually extinguished. So, is the DNC evil? Or are they secretly smart? If you still need convincing, just take this into account. No one, not one single member of the DNC uses TikTok. They've all seen the classified intelligence that the CCP won't allow the public to know about. They know what it is. TikTok is used to gather information on, and manipulate the people, not the privileged. That's why nearly every governmental body wants nothing to do with it. And its usage has been outright banned by roughly a quarter of the Earth's population. In TikTok's defense, the CCP made them gather data, promote communism, and hide communism's crimes against humanity. The CCP knows better than anyone, the best way to undermine the West is by deceiving its youth into thinking capitalism is evil, and communism is nearly divine. There is almost nothing else on earth more effective at that task than TikTok. And it cannot be stopped via executive or legal action. But that's TikTok, potentially just another innocent Chinese victim of the CCP's global offensive against freedom and democracy. Apple is a different matter. Its entire image is predicated on peace and freedom. But CEO Tim Cook has done the one thing, and the only thing, that could have stopped the CCP's stifling of both. In blocking the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act from being signed into law, he has condemned all of humanity for the rest of eternity. Siri, can you do a search on the massacre at Tiananmen Square for me? Siri. Hello. Is anybody there? Moving on. With all hope on earth nearly diminished, maybe the gods can help. Prayers are appreciated, but even the Christians believe that there will be an end of days. The fire and brimstone stuff keeps them in the pews, because it's utterly terrifying when you're staring a possible extinction level event squarely in the eyes, and there's almost nothing you can do about it. If Tim Cook's never-ending quest for slave labor will eventually relegate the Xinjiang Muslims and the Tibetan Buddhists to the pages of history, what happens when the CCP needs more slaves? Who's next? The Nepalese? The Vietnamese? Christians? Non-woke Democrats? The truth is, no one thinks it can happen to them. Until Apple and Tim Cook personally make sure it does. In the stead of the heavens, perhaps our eyes should gaze upon one another. I'm sure if they could, the gods would love to help, but it is feared that only a miracle of humanity can see us through these dark times. A human-made miracle may be the only thing that can keep the memories of those who have died alive. While we patiently wait for one, please conduct yourselves in a peaceful and legal manner. Violence will solve nothing. In fact, it will only serve to worsen the situation. If you are not an idea, but an organization bent on some kind of vigilante justice, your actions won't be covered up by law enforcement and defended by the progressive media. Those actions will instead be used to file false charges and stage show trials. against most of the world leaders that are still willing to stand up to those causing the current unprecedented international crisis. It is all right if you are confused in these uncertain times. If you do not know who to trust, or what to believe, just remember this acronym. C O W E R. C stands for critical race theory. Critical race theory stems from critical theory. Both are considered to be pro-communist propaganda spread by Marxists. CRT is the evolution of critical theory. And a lot of governments around the world are apparently being forced to mandate its proliferation. Even going so far as to make CRT a legal requirement for educational curriculum. CRT negates decades of civil and human rights efforts and legislation by teaching children and adults that we aren't all equal, and that our race, and sometimes gender, are all that matters. Fortunately, most people know by now that CRT is a bullshit ideology meant to divide the populace by race, political and religious affiliation, and gender identity. For some, as yet unknown, probably sinisterly communistic purpose. In America, CRT is spread by the progressive media and politicians, and enforced at the street level by BLM and Antifa. All of the above entities are protected by the FBI and CIA. The task is handled by more labor-oriented governments, corporations, and insurgencies in other parts of the world. Radical jihadists may also be a contributing factor. Much in the same way the National Socialist Workers' Party, otherwise known as the Nazi Party, came to power in Germany during the 1930s. Their state-run media, brown and black-shirt civilian enforcers, and Waffen-SS secret police took control of Germany, and helped to start a world war that ended up killing roughly 100 million people worldwide. Fortunately, under President Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, the Republicans, and other conservative leaders like Dwight D. Eisenhower and Winston Churchill, were allowed to end the Nazi threat to humanity. Unfortunately, conservative leaders are currently being suppressed and are facing predetermined, show trials. It would seem that someone or something, somewhere, has studied history, and knows what would happen to the Marxist insurrection if they were able to get organized, and be supported by a population that was aware of the situation. If CRT is not banned globally, permanently, soon children might start growing up actually believing it's true, without ever knowing the benefits of equality, freedom, and democracy, as progressives either have to, or want to, continue its proliferation. Only Republicans or liberal conservatives should be trusted to any extent. O stands for oppression. People who are currently oppressed by the CCP are either viewed as unfavorable by the party, or in their way. Instances can be as extreme as the systematic genocide of millions of ethnic or religious minorities, to being forcefully detained and enslaved, or as subtle as being shadow banned by YouTube. Those that are considered political progressives will stop at nothing to see the will of the CCP be done, whether it be knowingly, or unknowingly. They follow the progressive, far leftist media, and adhere to its sponsored narrative as if it were gospel. Some of them might still actually think that it is true, and don't just go along with it, because they don't want to be harassed or called an alt-right white supremacist. Be extremely cautious while bursting their bubble. A lot of them have believed that way most of their lives, and it can be quite disconcerting when they realize that most of their belief structure was based on what corporations needed them to believe in order to stay favorable in the eyes of the CCP. Please be forgiving and understanding. Humanity desperately needs converts. Only conservatives, and non-progressive liberals or Democrats can save us. It won't take much to lose them to the current attempted Marxist overthrow of the world's governments. Right now, Billions of people are being oppressed in one way or another. And human rights abuses are approaching World War II levels. While the countries that are the worst violators of human rights are taking over the United Nations Human Rights Commission. That's not a joke. That's actually the truth. And guess what? A lot of our tax dollars are funding it. So needless to say, the oppressed are probably becoming more like-minded by the minute. Though it might be hard to communicate right now with big tech cancel culture censoring most things the CCP disagrees with, some messages still get through. We the oppressed, stand alone together. And may we continue to stand. For all of those who no longer can. W stands for woke. The woke represent one of the clearest and most present dangers to world stability known today. Woke city councils in particular. The importance of whomever they are, or wherever their marching orders come from, pales in comparison to the damage they cause while in the performance of their duties. Reason and rationality are ignored, as they are feverishly compelled to legalize critical race theory, increase crime rates, and reduce public safety. They work diligently to sow the distrust of law enforcement, while reaping the rewards of being protected from criminal prosecution, accusing all who oppose them of being racists. They themselves do and say racist things at every opportunity. Nothing spreads divisiveness faster than the woke. Ironically, they refer to people that see their forest through the trees as the ones who are divisive. This strategy is eerily similar to how the CCP will often accuse people of being what they themselves are, knowing that they're the ones in the wrong. The problem is, the CCP has so much power and influence that they can have their favored politicians and corporations portray their version of the truth as reality. And anything, or anyone that opposes it, is often destroyed. So, be careful with the woke. There isn't much that links their actions or narratives to the CCP. But they almost always get away with every antisocial or criminal thing they do or say. They are protected. You are not. Keep that in mind. We need you alive to vote non-woke for as long as possible. In an instance where you know someone who is woke, who suddenly becomes awake, things can seem very weird to them. Remember, we desperately need converts. You can say things like, "It's okay. These are strange times," as well as, "Look at all these horrible things the CCP has done, and we need your help to stop them." E stands for enforcement. With the United Nations being rapidly assimilated by the CCP, the possibility that it will not be able to sanction the CCP is very real. It has become necessary for independent nations, and nation blocs to impose crippling economic sanctions of their own on the CCP, and heavily CCP-influenced countries like China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela. U.S. President Joseph Biden has recently taken steps to that end, but is also undermining geopolitical stability by weakening the defense of our Middle Eastern allies, and directly funding Iranian-backed terrorism. American tax dollars are currently raining down on Saudi Arabia and Israel at an astonishing rate in the form of rockets and bomb-laden drones, killing innocent Muslims and Jews. Of course he doesn't want to do it. President Biden isn't stupid. Hint. Hint. Someone, or something, is forcing him to do it behind the scenes. Someone, or something, that feels that Iranian oil, ethnic cleansing, and slave labor are very important. Maybe he'll get sick of it soon, and become the next Emmanuel Macron. Wouldn't that be nice? Also, there are a lot of military and law enforcement members that still believe in truth and justice. However, they may be forced to commit perjury, or cover up any progressively woke criminal actions that coincide with the far leftist insurgency at any time. This might be frustrating to the general public, but imagine how they feel, spending their whole life wanting to prevent crime and injustice, only now having to pretend that it's not even going on. At the same time, constantly falling under attack by a hostile progressive media and woke mob bent on destroying freedom and democracy itself, while accusing anyone who opposes them of doing the same. It would almost be too much to bear if one didn't know that it was because big tech and other woke corporations want to make astronomical profits off of CCP slave labor, and donate to the DNC in order to facilitate those profits. Which in itself is too much to bear. Because of this, there has been an increased number of police and military suicides. Quite frankly, that shit needs to stop like it never happened. Our parents and grandparents went up against CCP-backed militaries in Korea and Vietnam. What if too many of them committed suicide afterward? We would have lost the steady leadership that drew the Iron Curtain back and toppled the Berlin Wall, crushed the socialistic Ba'ath Party regime of Saddam Hussein, stood up to human rights violating dictatorships with crippling sanctions, and established the Abraham Accords. They even partnered with the hippies and their descendants to bring about an end to the jihadist mastermind Osama bin Laden, and the genocidal socialists Slobodan Milosevic, and Muammar Gaddafi. With that in mind, where will we be without you, and your sense of justice, members of the military and police forces? And your devotion to your people and your country? The citizens of Earth need selfless individuals like you now more than ever. Individuals willing to face danger at every turn, and endure the onslaught of the corrupted, often predetermined legal and political systems, corporately backed, progressive race-baiting leftist media, and woke social networking mob. Without you, we are lost. If you still need a reason to live, then consider this. Metaphorically speaking, it's World War II again. D-Day. You've been drafted. And your Higgins boat is almost to shore at Omaha Beach. You can hear the bullets hitting the steel door in front of you that's about to drop. Are you ready? You might actually know what to do. What about the rest of us that have utterly no idea of what's going on? What chance do we stand? So please, stay alive. Even if for no other reason than to vote conservative, and act professionally when confronted by the woke. And calmly tell them to, have a nice day. Then smile as you watch them have a meltdown. Because they needed you to act negatively in order to make a viral video. R stands for religion. Religious people around the world are being persecuted at an unparalleled rate. Almost as if it has become a systemic aspect of society. This is due to the CCP needing to be worshipped like the one true God. Anything that stands in the way of that, or communism, must be cleansed or suppressed. Or worse. If world religions don't unite, all of them that is, and respect one another, they will be further divided and conquered. Alone, they are an inconvenience. Together they can be formidable. A 5 to 6 billion strong voice for conservative politics and policies. Hopefully moderately conservative though. Remember, they aren't the only people who inhabit the earth. And there are a lot of human and civil rights to be considered. Religions have many differences in their beliefs and opinions, but in the face of possible extinction, these divides must be bridged. Not as a singular religion, but as an international council of the religious. Unification isn't the only difficulty facing religions today. Many have left the churches and temples in light of hardline rules and dogma, and felt more comfortable among the secular. Some have stayed faithful, but have fallen victim to known or unknown CCP influences. The religious should remain mindful that staying faithful in today's world is more complicated for some than others. If people can be swayed back to the faith, they should be embraced and forgiven. Remember, they can help turn the tide. For example, in America for instance, Southern Baptists and Catholics never lost their faith, but are desperately needed to vote Republican. The Democratic Party isn't what it used to be. They just want the money now, and only need you to get elected. Also, many who have renounced their religion have adopted what they feel is the more inclusive socialistic political spectrum, not knowing that it is backed by the CCP. They are not being asked to believe in a god, but in their fellow human beings. No human could see what the CCP is doing and say, "Yup. That's the way I think the world should be." If you can't vote conservative, then please demand that your politicians stand up to the CCP. Same goes for you, global labor voters. If you find your politicians leave something to be desired, then consider that conservatism has changed. It now means pro-Chinese, anti-Chinese Communist Party. It cannot be overstated how much your vote is needed. Without you, humanity may be doomed. The fate of the world is quite literally your prerogative. We now return you to your regularly scheduled socially engineered programming, meant to trick you into believing that white privilege is a real thing. And forget that socio-economic discrepancies exist in every country, regardless of ethnic status quo percentages.